Hello everyone, and welcome to this tip tutorial for unitycookie.com. My name is Patrick Boelens, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to create a camera switching system where you can switch cameras using either these buttons here on the left or by pressing one of the red spheres attached to every camera. So what we're going to be doing is, or what I have here is this scene with a plane and a building at the center, and I have 4 cameras in place. And each of those cameras is parented to a sphere. And the reason I did this is that so that when I grab one of these spheres and move it, both the camera and the sphere here move, so you don't have to move both of them. Make sure that you have both selected, etc. So it's really just a convenience parent there. And for the buttons, all I did is I've created 4 GUI textures by going to Game Object, Create Other, GUI Texture. And all I did was I changed the texture, set its width and height, and moved its position using these y and x and y coordinates here. And if you say put this at 0, 0, you can see it goes to the bottom left. And if I place it at 1, 1, it goes to the top right. So everything is in screen space between 0 and 1. Alright, so I'm just going to go get started here and go to create and create my JavaScript file here. And I'm going to call this camera switcher or camera switch script. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And I'm just going to open this up here in MonoDevelop. And delete this. And what I want is to create one general script or one generic script which I can attach to either both the button elements here or to one of the spheres, so that when I click either one of them, it does the exact same thing. I may be wondering how to do that, or maybe how to find something like that. And the way to do that is to go to type in mono behavior. As you can see that it lights up. And with it selected, you can either press Command quotation mark or Control quotation mark on Windows. Or you can, with it selected, go to Help and click Unity API Reference. Now, alternatively, you could have gone to this link and just typed in mono behavior here. But the reason we're using mono behavior is because this is the base class for every Unity script or object, at least by default. So we have all of these functions here that we can use. So we have some variables, well, 1 to be exact. We have some functions, and then we have some overridable functions. And this list contains the functions like update and awake and start, on mouse enter, the on trigger enters, stuff like that. But also, the one that we want is on mouse down, which says on mouse down is called when the user has pressed the mouse button while over the GUI element or collider, which is perfect because we can add collider source spheres, no problem. So if we click this on mouse down, we can see that it returns nothing, it's of type void, and it doesn't take any parameters. Cool. So to do this, we can just start typing function on mouse down, no parameters, and then in the curly brackets we can start typing what we want to see happen. So to start off, let's just say debug.log, which will just print something to the console, and let's say clicked. Alright, so going back to Unity here. Let's go ahead and attach this script to all of our buttons there. And we can do that by either dragging them on here like so, or we can click a button and go to Components, Scripts, and add it from there. I'm just going to quickly drag these on here. And if I now hit Command P to play the game, I can click on one of these buttons and, oh, you can see we're still getting these. There are 4 audio listeners in the scene message, which is quite annoying because it prints every single frame. If we hit Control or Command Shift C to go to the console, you can see it being printed a lot of times. And the way what this means is each of these cameras here underneath my spheres have both a camera component and an audio listener. And so we now have 4 cameras currently trying to render something and listen to all of the audio, which it doesn't like. Now we could either disable this one and the camera component, or we can just go ahead and disable the entire game object. which isn't really disabling. It's called making unactive in Unity. So I'm going to do that for all except the last one. Alright, so you can see that it just jumps to the last active camera. And also, if we look at our sphere here now, we can see that I've already attached the sphere collider to it. Actually, I think that comes on with default. Let's just take a look here, create another sphere. So yes, it does come with a sphere collider, but what I've done is I've made it a bit bigger by saying radius, putting the radius up, and I've set it to isTrigger is true. And the reason for that is that this way it won't use any physics. It's just there to be detected by raycasts and mouse clicks and stuff like that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And now if I hit Command or Control P, see I've no longer get any error messages. And if I now click on the camera button, it says clicked. Cool. So let's try the same for one of the spheres here. Actually, let's just attach it to all of them while we're at it. Okay, one more. Alright, and let's also switch our camera to one where we can actually see one of the spheres. So let's see if... Alright, here we have two spheres and the buttons. Now press Command P. You can either click here and get clicked, or I can just open my console and clear it out here. I can press one of the buttons and it says clicked. Alright. Oh, by the way, it also says that, I don't think I said this, but you can see it, the last message in the bottom left. Alright, so let's stop playing. Next step would be to make sure that every button or every sphere knows which camera to use. And to make this a little bit interesting, I'm going to be using two different techniques for the buttons and spheres. So I'm going to worry about the buttons first. So I'm going to create a new public variable by typing var camera to control, and it's going to be of type GameObject. And the reason for that is that I want to make active or inactive the entire game object and not just the camera components, because then we still have the audio listener component to worry about. If you were doing this in C#, just as a quick note, you would have to make this public. In JavaScript, everything is public by default, so it shows up in the editor, whereas in C#, everything is private by default, so you'd have to say public game object camera control. But we don't need to do that right now. So I'm just going to save that, go back here. Now if we select one of our cameras, or camera buttons, hey, one of them didn't have the... Oh, this one has 2 scripts and the other one has 0. Let's change that. Component, script, camera switch script. But you can see that we now have this camera to control slot. So if I just expand all of my spheres here, and let's start at camera 1, I'm going to make that the camera angle, and I just drag that in. Same for oh, this is camera button 3, okay. Camera button 2. And the last camera button. Oops, gotta select the button first and then drag this in. Alright. So now what we need to do, now that we have that set up, we can say camera to control dot active equals true, because we want to re-enable or make active again the camera that that button controls. Though we also need to find a way to make the one that we're no longer using, or we no longer want to use, and make that unactive. And the way to do that is by typing in camera with a capital C dot main, which gets the main camera, the current rendering camera, and we can just say dot game object dot active is false. So using camera.main, we get the camera that we're currently using. Then we're accessing the game object as a whole, and we are setting its active property to false. And next we are setting the active property of the camera that we want to use to true. Let me go ahead and save this, wait for it to compile, which you can see at the bottom right. Hit play, and now when I click these buttons, you should see the camera view changing. Alright, awesome. And actually, we can very easily make this work for the spheres as well. by pretty much using the same exact thing, switching in the camera here. But for all of these spheres, imagine that you don't have any of these buttons, and you're using something like this, where you have only spheres with cameras attached to them. Then it would be sort of a hassle to keep having to select a sphere, drag its child into there. So what we can do is we can say in this function, if camera to control, which means if it's filled in and not null. Another way of writing this would be to say is not null. Then we are going to do this, because it knows what the next camera is. Else, we don't have a camera filled in, and so I want it to default to the child. So I can say, well, actually this line, we can just cut that out of there, paste that here, because we always want to disable the current camera, and only then we want to make sure if we have a new camera to control, we set that to active. If we don't have that, I want to find this object's child. So I'm going to type transform with a small t, which is shorthand for accessing its own transform component. And then I can say get child at 0, because I want to get its first child, and arrays and lists always start counting at 0, not 1. And I can say dot game object dot active equals true. So if we have something filled in the camera to control, it sets that to active. If not, it tries to find its first child. Now if you would have this reversed, where you have the spheres attached as children to the cameras, you could instead say transform the parent.game object active. Right, so saving that, waiting for it to compile. And on identifier camera to control. Okay. Yes, I can imagine that. Seems I've placed an extra L there. Let's try it again. Compiling, no more errors. Hitting Command P to play this. And our buttons are still working. I was already at camera 3, sorry. So these are still working. And now if I press one of these spheres, it also goes to the correct sphere. We should start seeing this from an angle from the right, which we do. If I press this, we should see it from the bottom left. Also works. So very easy and very generic way of easily setting up these camera controls, but also definitely very useful and very versatile. You could use them for things like this, or for cutscenes even, or maybe changing the view to a controllable rocket you've just launched in a game. Really very useful. That's it. I'm going to stop right now before I start rambling again, like I tend to do at the end of tutorials. So thank you all very much for watching, and catch you another time.